Mr. Speaker, my second statement today is on the initial coin offering regulations, which, as I mentioned, will be shared with honorable members and were gazetted earlier this week. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to advise this honorable House and the public of the initial coin offering regulations that have been published to supplement the Companies and Limited Liability Company Initial Coin Offering Amendment Act 2018. Mr. Speaker, in November of 2017, I announced to members the Blockchain Task Force, which will be the catalyst to advance the government's plans to create a fintech industry in Bermuda. It is the government's view that fintech can provide economic diversification, bring new business to the island, help boost GDP, and create meaningful jobs while helping to prepare our financial system and economy for the future. Mr. Speaker, it was clear to the government then that there was a lot of legal ambiguity in relation to fintech, and companies were looking for legal certainty. In response to this market demand, the government set out to develop a new regulatory framework for distributed ledger technology companies looking to operate in a well-regulated environment. The first step in the process was for the government to put in legislation specifying how companies and limited liability companies wishing to raise funds via an initial coin offering will need to conduct themselves. The next step in the process was the passing of the Digital Asset Business Act 2018, which was legislation specifically put in place to regulate companies carrying on digital asset business and to protect the interests of clients or potential clients of these digital asset business. Mr. Speaker, having successfully passed both pieces of legislation, the government has now turned its attention to prescribing initial coin offering regulations. As honorable members are aware, ICOs may be conducted in Bermuda only pursuant to a grant of consent by the minister responsible for companies. The purposes of the ICO regulations are to clearly define the minimum required information for ICOs and to outline the compliance measures that a company or limited liability company must adopt when conducting an ICO. Mr. Speaker, minimum required information as outlined in the ICO regulations includes things such as providing information on all the persons involved with the ICO, providing a description of the project, including key features of the product or service, the target market, how the ICO will be financed, and the amounts of money the company is intending to raise via the ICO. Providing information on the technical standards of the digital asset that will be issued, providing information on whether the digital asset can be traded or transferred between persons, and providing a description of the technical standards or software, blockchain, or other distributed ledger technology that will be used to identify participants in the ICO. Mr. Speaker, compliance measures as outlined in the ICO regulations include such things as the need to identify any participant and verify the participant's identity, the need for a company to ensure that it applies appropriate measures relating to identification and verification of the participants in the ICO before it issues a digital asset, instances where companies must conduct enhanced due diligence on ICO participants, the types of records a company is required to keep and the retention period, and the need for a company to carry out an internal compliance review on its initial coin offering. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that the approach taken in developing the regulations is the same approach that we have traditionally taken when developing regulations for our local financial institutions. Traditionally, we have used a risk-based approach, meaning that the amount of regulations a company will be subject to is based on the level of risk of the activities that the company is engaged in. For instance, if a company engaged in activities that potentially expose it to a high degree of money laundering risk, it will be subject to anti-money laundering regulations. However, if a company is running a project without any money laundering risk, this company should not be covered by the same regulations. Mr. Speaker, the Proceeds of Crime, Anti-Money Laundering, and Anti-Terrorist Financing Regulations 2018 were used as a blueprint when it came to the compliance measures adopting parts of the Proceeds of Crime Act regulations that pertain to ICO-type activities. Mr. Speaker, any company wanting to commence the process for issuing an ICO from Bermuda can visit the Bermuda FinTech website at www.fintech.bm to complete the application form. Once the form is completed and the white paper has been submitted for review, the approval process is estimated to take 4 weeks. Mr. Speaker, we continue to communicate to the world that Bermuda is a significant option for fintech-related businesses and that we have expeditiously developed rules and regulations which ensure that fintech companies and their activities are well regulated within a safe environment for the industry to grow, whilst also ensuring that this new regulatory environment protects consumers and the reputation of this jurisdiction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.